True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I've been, and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease has spread, my senses not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and on earth. Heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It's impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had not desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had this eye of a vulture, pale blue eye with film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degree, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with the caution, with the foresight, with the dissimulation. I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then I had made an opening surface for my head. I put in a dark lantern and closed, that no light shone out. Then thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it in slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman be so wise as this? And then, with my head, was well in the room, and lit the lantern cautiously, oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that the slight thin ray fell upon the vulture eye, and this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But the eye was always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. But this was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went broadly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquired how he passed the night. So you see, I have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th hour night, I was more than usually cautious, opening the door and watch his minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was opening the door little by little, and not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps He heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you think I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch, with the thick darkness, for the shutters were closed, fashioned through the fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it. Steadily. I heard his head in, with about an opened lantern with my thumb slipped upon the thin fastening. The old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quiet, still, and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, simply listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh no. It was low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when the overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well, many nights just at midnight, when all the world slept. It has welled up from my own bosom, deepening, with its dreadful echo and terrors that distract me. I say, I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise. When he had turned into the bed, his fears had ever since grown upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is nothing but a mouse crossing the floor, or it's merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suspicions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him, enveloped the victim. And then it was a mournful influence, unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he never saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my hand within the room. When I had waited long enough, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a little, very, very little crevice in the lantern, so that it opened it. You cannot imagine how slightly, until the length of a single dim ray. Then the thread of a spider shot from out the crevice and fell upon the vulture. Aye, it was open wide open, and grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw the perfect distance, all the dull blue, hideous, vile over it, in that chilled very marrow in my bones. But I could not see nothing else in the old man's face or person, for I had distracted the ray, as if by instinct, fiercely upon the damned spot. And I have not told you that it was not a mistake for madness, but for the over-accurateness, for the sense. Now I say, there came in my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such which makes envelop in cotton, and I knew the sound well. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased to my fury, beating of the drum, that stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder, with every instant of the old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder. I say louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead of hour of the night, admire the dreadful silence at that old house. So strange a noise. This excited me, uncontrollable in my terror. Yet, for some minute longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by the neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. Then I smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart. It there, many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would not trouble me no more. If still you think I'm mad, you will think so no longer when I describe to you the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. Then I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber, and I disposed of them and deposited them between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been way too weary for that. A tub had caught it all. When I had made at the end of the labors, 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight, as the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light. For what had I to fear? There entered 3 men, introduced themselves with perfect severity as the offers for the police. A shriek had been heard by the neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been logged to the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputied to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, said I, was my own dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search. Well, I had led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here for the rest for their fatigue, while I myself, in wide audacity to my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of thy victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was strangely at ease. They sat, and then, while I answered them cheerily, they chatted of familiar things, but ere longer, I felt myself getting pale. Wished them gone. My head ached, and I fastened a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained defineness until the length I found the noise within my ears. No doubt it grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with huge elongated voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was the low, dull, quick sound. Much such sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, yet the officers heard not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose, argued about trifles in high key with violent gestures, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor, to and fro, with heavy strides, as if excited. But the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, God! What could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and clattered upon the boards. But the noise arose over and constantly increased. It grew louder and louder. And still the men chattered pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no, no! They heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this. Agony. Anything was more tolerable than this distress. I could not bear their hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark, louder, 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 louder! Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks, here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart.